up on my Instagram and I was like, what?
Okay.
It was the Cypress Hill thing. And
Okay.
this is fucking awesome. Like, what is
Oh
this
yeah.
about? Right. So I feel like
Okay.
we can even just start there. Like the show is really about people who have thought about doing things differently. And that can be in science, right? It can be in business, it can be in art.
Right.
I'm just really curious about like what makes us all tick. You have to be brave enough kind of to say like, hey, I have this other idea. I want to try and do it this way. And you started playing the violin when you were 4, right? So
Yes. Yes. Yes.
you were really in it as a little kid. I'd love to even just like go back to that. Like, who introduced violin to you?
So I wouldn't say I was in it. It's one of those things. I think it was a natural gift that I kind of pushed away for a long time because I didn't know that you could do that as a career. And literally, like, I didn't grow up with any money, but I got a violin scholarship as a kid. I had I don't know, a philanthropist donate a violin when I was like 7 years old. I had lessons with one of the guys in the LA Phil, and that was a scholarship when I was a kid. But still, I was like, I don't know that you can do this for a living. I was like, I don't want to teach this, like be a music teacher. And actually, I think music teachers are awesome. But I mean, like, just if you only had students and you're teaching them.
Well, yeah, and as a kid, you don't necessarily appreciate how awesome music teachers are.
Yeah. So like, I went to college, and ironically, I studied critical thinking, which is, I know that's what you do.
Yeah, very
And I
cool.
was at a job, I was doing sales, and I hated it. And then after work, I would just be making music in GarageBand. And this was like 17 years ago. I'm getting old now. And anyway, so I would make these songs, and I pressed my own CD, and I was like, I wonder if anyone would buy this. So I actually drove down to Santa Monica, the Third Street Promenade,
Yeah.
and I set up a little amp and put out like a basket of CDs, and this is just to test it out. Within 10 minutes, I had a huge crowd. I sold every CD that I pressed, like the Sharpie,
That's so
and like
cool.
it was so crappy, but I sold everything I had, and then immediately got kicked out because I didn't have a permit and I was set up in an illegal spot anyway. And then I had like a light bulb. I was like, wait, that was fun. And then two, people will pay me money for this. So I was like, how do I figure out to do more of that? And I started to busk part time, probably in like 2006, and that slowly led to full time. And I was able to quit my job, and that was pretty awesome. And what I was doing was mixing beats. It wasn't hip hop. It wasn't any defined genre, if you will. But I just love mixing beats and like synth sounds with a violin, and this blending of two different worlds. And like, this sounds awesome. And then a lot of people did too. So like for 4 or 5 years, I remember exactly, sold 50,000 demos on the street. That was my full time job. Like I would have a goal. It's like, I'm going to go to Santa Monica, and I'm not going to leave until I sell 100 CDs. And that wouldn't happen every day. There'd be several days where it wouldn't happen. But I was like, I'm just going to be here, get here 5 in the morning, stay here at 10 at night till I sell all my CDs. And so I did that for a while, and then I started getting hired by rappers and R&B singers.
Yeah, so
So
slow
they,
down a little bit because I feel like I have 100 questions for you.
mm,
And I feel like just even going back to like the the Philharmonic is not a little deal, right? So like getting a
no,
scholarship to play there is like you're kind of just glossing over that. That's like a major, major accomplishment for anyone. And so
oh man,
like tell me what that's like as a kid. Like what is
I didn't play with the orchestra. It was one of the members,
okay.
who was a coach or a teacher for over 10 years. So that's where I got my formal training.
And how did
Um,
that happen? Was it like a parent that brought you to introduce you to that or
no, I'll give my mom credit. She facilitated that. That's one thing she's very good at, is like getting scholarships. And the fact that it was financially motivated, like we didn't have money for lessons, and it was like what, $200 an hour when I was growing up. That's crazy.
yeah.
So I got a scholarship, got formal training, and that's one of the things. It's a little bit different than the piano. Like I have two sons, and my oldest plays piano, and we have an amazing teacher for him. So I'll give them whatever they need. But I feel like on the piano, you could kind of learn things on your own more than you could on the violin. Violin is so hard. There aren't any frets like on a guitar or keys on a piano. It's less structured, if you will, and there is something with the muscle memory and the ear that have to like coincide. So you kind of need an ear before you do it. That's part of the reason I got into that. And then you need a good teacher to like literally physically move your finger. Oh, you're a fraction of a hair off. So I'll even help my youngest, if he listens to me, who plays violin. But I think you really need a human like interaction teacher in the same room with you on a violin. And maybe someday there will be something that could help because there's a lot of people that can teach themselves piano, and I don't know how anybody would do that to like an elite level on a violin yet, but that would be a challenge if somebody wants to figure that out.
Well, it's also interesting in the sense of, like, how much stuff is online now, right? That, like, people wanna learn stuff. It never occurred to me that you need to actually have somebody physically moving, like, manipulating your
For
body.
for the beginning stages, absolutely. At a certain point, you can kind of go off and you might be able to find a virtual teacher. So you're in Boston, right?
Yep.
I'm in California. You could be teaching me right now,
Yeah.
and I'd be watching, but it's on a little screen, so it might be hard. You might be, it's like so it's it. I don't know how you would do that, but if you already have the basics down, I could watch you and I could see your fingers on a fretboard and be like, oh, that makes sense to me. But I already have like that foundation.
Yep.
So I'm assuming it's like I don't do any martial arts, but I bet like doing jujitsu is the same. Like
Mhm.
I could go on a YouTube tutorial and be like, I want to learn some jujitsu. I feel like you need to be in there with the person and have them move you around physically.
Yeah, and the muscle memory, I think, makes a lot of sense too. I'd never thought of that before. So, okay,
Yeah,
so why did your mom pick violin for you?
I think she recognized because she knew theory of music pretty well, um, that you need to have a good ear, and I was just kind of drawn to it. As a kid, I think I went to an orchestra concert, and I'll have to look up his name again. This is horrible. I don't remember this, but he was a gypsy violinist. I
Okay.
think he was like a Holocaust survivor, and he was doing this flashy violin performance, and I was just mesmerized. And he played for me, and I was able to sing along and match every pitch.
Wow.
And it's one of those things like, and I see that with my sons too, because like they can match any pitch. And even though my wife doesn't talk about it because she's a graphic designer, she has perfect pitch.
Wow.
And I think it's one of those things that's like genetic that you can pass down. But if you don't like foster that, that talent doesn't do anything.
Yeah, well,
So you
that's interesting. I feel like one of the things that occurs to me is like, I wonder how many kids have ability like that, and it's never
that's not
picked
a
on, right?
lot.
And so
Yeah, no, no.
use
I
it.
play at schools. I play at schools all over the country. Uh, After street performing, I actually started touring colleges and universities. So there's probably not a state. I think there's like a couple states I haven't been to, but I played in for 5 years. I toured colleges,
Wow.
and then sometimes I would do like surprise performance at a high school or maybe even uh, middle school. And there's always kids or young adults who have talent, don't know it, or don't know how to go after it, or don't have the means to like help them.
Mhm.
So that sucks. Like um, and it's really easy to identify if you have a good ear and I'm like, oh wow, these people have potential for this instrument or this kind of art. But maybe they don't even know about it.
Yeah, and I think schools are getting rid of a lot of these things too, right? I
Mm,
mean, I feel like even in my kids' school, like the music is really non-existent. They get like the recorder for like 1 year, right? And it's such
right.
a loss because I think, it used to be that with the when you think about like the trivium and the quadrivium, you go back to the sort of liberal arts style education, that music was taught basically as math in motion. And it was a way of
Yep.
applying math skills, for anybody. So like you're not good at like pen and paper math. Well, if you can do music, you're actually doing math. And I think those kinds of transferable skills
Yep.
open it to a lot more people too.
I'm actually horrible at math. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
I've got a really good ear. Like I learn auditorily. I'm actually like looking at your square, but I'm like watching you by listening to you.
Okay.
It's crazy. So I hear something and I can play it, which is why I think I fell into pop, hip hop, or contemporary music because most of these producers, even the big ones, none of them read music. Like I told you, all of these top producers for songs and R&B and hip hop, they don't read music, but they're like a prodigy on the piano.
Mhm.
And so when I was a street performer, they'd be, hey, we want to hire you because they hear me. And I was like, okay, cool. And then they're like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Just like play along with that. And I'm like, okay. And I can match it. Like, oh, wow. So what you're talking about, if you can read music and I'm okay at it, I'm not great. If I had a piece of music, I have to like study it. Uh, I can't just read it on the spot. If I hear it, I can probably play on the spot, which is weird. But those transferable skills are great as a musician for people in like writing for movies. So like those guys will get called in and they don't have time to learn the music. They just have it put in front of them and they have to play it, which is
Mhm.
something I don't know how to do. And ironic, I do write music for TV and film, but it's like something I just think about and write at like a home studio. Not that I show up and I'm like, all right,
You're
like follow.
composing that in that case, right? You're not sort of just performing it.
Correct. So I write original music and I can figure it out or play along with a track, but I don't like if I need a score, I'll actually hire somebody to make that for me after I record it. Like, here's what I wrote.
Wow.
Now, can you make this score so these other musicians can play it?
Yeah, well, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. So your process is in almost entirely auditory.
Yes, 100%.
And so let's segue a little bit into so like you're doing this work with GarageBand, really, like, right?
Yeah.
So it's like technology comes about, you can sort of mix things at home. And you're mixing beats that are what? Are they more on the hip hop scale or are they more on the pop scale?
No,
I mean, you've done
not at all.
country,
I just
I feel like you're kind of known for the hip hop thing, but you actually have a huge range of work you've done.
I didn't know I was gonna do any kind of hip hop work. Like, I'm a white dude from Orange County, like California. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I love hip hop. I listen to all music. You name the genre, I listen to it. And it was from getting hired by rappers. There was this one rapper. He was from New York. I got hired in Santa Monica, and they were out looking for girls. They were looking for drugs, and instead they found me. And they're like, "Hey, they're like, do you want to do a session?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do a session." And there was no payment involved. I was just excited to do it. And when I was playing in the studio, it was a really legit like record label like session. The rapper came in the booth and he's like, "Nah, I'm getting more in the pocket." And this is a guy from like New York, and he's got all of his jewelry. Just he's like, so he was in there like, and I'm like, I finally like kind of like merged, and I was doing a classical melody, and that's when I kind of fell in love with the combination of like a gritty beat and like a pretty classical melody that you can put together.
So, but when you were doing the street performing, what was on those CDs you were selling?
Generic beats that were royalty free or that I would make myself that weren't genre specific, but they were a beat, and I would just make up melodies to them.
Wow, I would love to hear
Yeah.
that. I mean, that would do you still have any of those
I
around?
I would have, so this is a sad thing. I was selling physical hard copy CDs from 2006 as a street performer to about 2010, 2011, and I still sold some CDs after that, but half of them I don't even know, like, I don't even know where they are. They were never streamed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And some of the ideas were pretty cool, and now that it's almost 20 years ago, I actually am starting to, like, recreate some of the music I wrote, which was the idea itself was great, but now I play it better. So I'm doing that with some older songs.
You still remember
So
it. So
yeah.
your auditory memory for the music you've created, it sounds like is locked in. So like you don't
Yeah,
that's not on sheet music anywhere, but you can remember what the
no.
sounds were. That's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then when I was touring colleges, I was doing that for about 5 years, and I started doing music festivals, and I'm killing it with CDs, because this is pretty cool. I know you do a lot of stuff in technology. Up until 2018, I would kill it selling CDs, and then I think I was at a jazz festival, and I knew I was gonna make bank selling CDs, and I had a really long line, and every single person in line didn't buy anything. They just asked for a signature on, like, the shirt that came with the festival, take a picture. I didn't sell anything, and I asked one of the people in line was a little bit older, and I assumed they're wanted a physical hard copy, and they're like, "This is 2018." Like, "Nah, that's all good. I'm just gonna go like download it on Apple Music." And I was like, "Okay." So that's when I knew CD sales died.
Yeah.
There was like a weird little interim period, if you will, from 2018 to 2020, where like it was kind of weird trying to like make any money streaming. So I
Yeah.
made a lot of money with actual CDs, and then I wasn't making any money in streaming. And then 2020, all my gigs got canceled, and so all I did was I recorded a bunch of albums. I just released music, did Facebook lives like daily, and then my streams like skyrocketed, like it was crazy. So that was like, okay, I wasn't making any money, and I kind of made that transition to that streaming thing that's going on now.
Well, and so that's also like an interesting pivot, right? Because like here you are, you've sort of done the street performing enough to be successful to quit your, day job, right? And just do this full time. And then like the world kind of throws two curveballs at you. One is streaming, and until there was the big, what was it, like the Spotify lawsuit, there really was the Wild West for anybody trying to make money. And then you also have COVID shut down all of the, public gatherings, which was, I assume, a big revenue stream for you too, and a way of getting your music out to
Yes.
more people.
I lost a lot of money. I was actually feeling pretty cocky in 2019. Like I literally just played at Carnegie Hall, and I opened up for two really famous Latin comedians. I believe one of the headliner was Franco Escamilla. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. And then Fluffy Guy, Gabriel Iglesias. And so like it was a sold out crowd, and I did a 15-minute show at Carnegie Hall,
Wow.
standing ovation. I'm like, dude, I'm the man. That's what I'm thinking in my head. And like literally 1 week later, every gig I had lined up for the year was emailing me, sorry, like because of COVID, we're pulling out, we're going to reschedule. Several people would ask for money back, and I'm like, I have a wife, 2 kids. This is how I make a living. So I
Yeah,
was like, so
they didn't
like,
have insurance policies or anything that would
I don't get paid on that. That's not how I'm a. I don't know what you would call a contractor almost. So
yeah.
like if I don't play, I don't get paid. So like everything got canceled and clients got weird, and I'm like, this sucks. Uh, and then after sulking for about 2 weeks, that's when I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go back to work and make this streaming thing happen. And I just went. So I made like every day that when I was supposed to have prepare for a gig, I'd be just in the studio or home studio, just pumping out content, and that kind of primed the following year because I didn't see that right away. But then it's crazy. I think a lot of people in television, you probably like see all the series like just took off because everybody's like at home
Mhm,
and
mhm.
started streaming music. So that kind of like helped me get into that phase. It was uncomfortable, but then that's how I made the transition.
And do you feel like your process was different? Like, I mean, obviously performing in front of a live audience, you have a feedback loop of
Mm.
people really responding to you in real time. Whereas putting yourself out there online, you kind of don't know what you're going to get, or you don't know if people are responding to you for one
Oh no,
reason
no, I
or another.
see comments as you're playing. I love that.
Oh,
It
that's
was
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
And if it's a Facebook Live, I'd have people tuning in from all over the world saying, "What's up?" or "Hey, I'm in this state," and I'm at home playing in the living room with like I'm not even wearing shoes. I have socks on. I'll be like drinking whiskey. I'm like, "Hey, cheers, everybody!" Like it was fun. I didn't mind that, but after a while, there you do miss something from like the energy of real people actually in the room.
Hmm.
So I think that's important. I don't mind doing that, but it's way different. The energy's different, and it's one of those things like you have to be there. Like if you videotape somebody's performance, well, oh, that's nice. If you were there, you'd be like, oh man, that was magical. So it's one of those things you only know if you're there in person.
Well, and also I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of writing. So like if,
Mm,
you sort of look at the media landscape today and people are having to produce so much content that I think the quality has gone way, way down, right? Because it's just about
mm,
like throwing more shit out there. Whereas you can really spend time being thoughtful as a journalist, right? Like reporting, talking to lots of people. You don't feel like you're under some crunch to get it out there before you're really ready. It's a totally different process. And I wonder whether any of that translates in terms of thinking about your performance because you're not just performing music, right? Like you're not just going up and doing, Vivaldi because like that's what you do. You're creating this and the novelty of what you're creating. I mean, even your Instagram account is like just amazing. I love it. It's like
oh, thank
there's
you.
so much variety. And there's also it seems to me like an intuitive sense of hey, what if I tried this music, right? Or this,
Right, right.
and you seem like you're having fun doing it. And I know like, the day to day isn't always fun, but I wonder in terms of your creative process, like if you're preparing for Carnegie Hall, I imagine it's different than thinking I'm going to do a Facebook Live every day.
So for me, I've actually honed what I do pretty well. So I can pump out content every week. Actually, a lot of gigs that I do. Some of these bigger festivals are wonderful. I love them, and then all my clients are great. But a lot of them are just a check. If I didn't have to do that, I would be pumping out way more content.
Oh, interesting.
Like, and I would like to do that and only focus on these bigger shows where you can reach like actual fans that like what I do directly,
Hmm.
and that's it. Where I belong is in the studio creating music. Like I'm very very good at that, and now I'm starting to produce for other artists. I actually just performed on a track with a rapper in Denmark. Like it's showing how global we are. Like the biggest rapper in Denmark. Like I'm on his track. I can't wait for that to come out. And I gotta be honest, I don't know. I can't understand a word he's saying, but the track is dope, and occasionally he'll say like gangster shit, blah blah, bad bitch, I'm like blah 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 blah, like, and I'm like, oh, but like he's good. He's like the battle rapper in Denmark. I'm like, okay, we're global. I can perform with anybody.
That's
So
great.
I love just like recording music and bouncing files with people, whether it's in New York or Denmark or wherever.
Yeah.
So my heart's in composing music and then playing live for like reaching people, not just playing live at events because it's a check. If that makes sense.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I just think like it's, sort of like what you were saying before that like some people get into the studio and they perform what's in front of them versus actually creating music. I mean, you're creating new music. Like I don't know exactly how to say that, right? It's like you're sampling the music score of other artists, but you're doing it in
Exactly.
violin, so it's actually coming through I think part of what's kind of cool about it is that it's like evocative, right? Like you recognize this is the song I know, but it's in a new format that I've never would have thought to do it in, right?
Yeah, it's kind of it's funny you mentioned that. So I know you found me on the Cypress Hill post. I'm such a big fan, and that particular piece had like a really cool orchestral feel. That's why I was excited to jump on it. There's a few tracks like that, like "Into Club" with Dr. Dre is one, and that went viral, and that's how I toured 50. But then Cypress Hill, that beat was very similar, and I was like, oh, I could do these orchestral things and make it pretty or badass or whatever, and kind of fit into the pocket. So I like jumping in on tracks like that. Uh, but I do a lot of stuff in Houston, for example, and there's an established record label, for example, big catalog. You may not know their music if you're not from Houston, but it's showing that we want you to recreate our songs on the violin. So it's like almost bringing life back to songs that were hits
Mhm,
20, 30 years ago and
mhm.
making them fresh again for people that either don't know it or they do know it, and it's like, oh, cool, here's something that's new and fun to listen to, and then it helps promote the artist's original song. So like I'm basically a promoter, promoting their music, and it's pretty fun.
Well, I think one of the things that's especially interesting to me about the hip hop sort of genre, right, is that there's so much, whether it's like the inspiration from like oppression to express yourself, right, like under horrible
Mm,
circumstances. Like you look at the early days of hip hop and how it's sort of migrated into like now it is a lot of like white boys who like it, right, and but it's storytelling, and it's a
mm,
lot of the lyrics are really powerful stories, right, in some capacity. And I think people think of classical music as like stuffy and
mm.
from a past generation. I mean, like you look at all of these orchestras or
Well,
symphonies that
it depends on the composer. I don't think that people are, seeing classical music the way it should be, like young kids, for example, who, like, wanna play video games or skateboard or play football, and they're like, "Violin's lame. That's for, like, band nerds," or whatever. But you're talking about classical music, and you mentioned Vivaldi. He wrote stories like the 4 seasons, summer, winter, fall, spring. Every if you look at the music, it's like, "Oh, this is a description. This is a storm." And the music would be like, "Oh, this is they're freezing in the winter,"
yeah.
or they're happy. So like everything or this particular piece, well, that's a bird chirping. It sounds kind of silly, but like he was a storyteller and ironic. He's actually my favorite composer.
He's
But
my
like
mom too.
I don't think a lot of kids are exposed to that music or understand it. And I don't know. I listen to all genres, so it depends on who you are, where you grow up, and like what surrounds you. Because you can find storytelling in rap music, right? You can find story music telling in country music,
Mhm.
and you can find stories. And maybe you're really musical in jazz. Like you're like, oh, those scales, that's telling a story.
Yep.
That's like at the top of the pyramid. But like, I don't know. Like you can find storytelling in almost any genre.
That's sort of my point in the sense of like, I think we have these ways of sort of categorizing these genres of music that are totally inaccurate, right? And so,
Mm,
what you're doing by bridging this together, I can only assume is inspiring kids who had a marginalized view of what classical music was to actually be kind of curious, right? Like, what is this about? And I think,
absolutely.
Metallica did that great symphony set, and that was really powerful, right? Because they're doing the same thing you're doing, I mean, in a one-time situation. But I remember hearing that one of their big songs was based on Pachelbel's Canon in D,
Mm.
and it actually you can hear it, but you wouldn't know
What
that
song
right
is
away.
that, by the way? I want to look that up. I
Yeah,
might make a note.
and I may not
I'm
be
gonna
one, but it's one of their pieces. And I
I'm
think,
gonna write that
really good musicians often are classically trained, right? And then they
down.
take it just like painters, right? Or other kinds of artists. You start in a school where you're learning from masters who came before you, and you have to learn that way. And then you can, sort of create your own school of expression. And I feel like
Mm,
that's what you're doing. I mean, like it feels to me like, and I just know like I grew up in a family that always went to symphony, and like actually my elementary school, it was at least twice a year, but it might have been four times a year. We all went, and the kids took over Boston Symphony Hall, and it was
that's
a daytime performance, right, and it was like a great field trip. And I think it was just sort of like part of what you do. And I remember as a kid doing watercolors to the Four Seasons. And so you're thinking about like, what do I hear? And what would it look like if it were in a picture? My kids don't do anything like that, anymore. Right. I mean, and not at school. And I think that it's a huge loss.
How old are your kids?
10 and 12.
Okay, we're almost in the same boat. So I have 11 and 13. It's like as of a week ago, and they don't really do the art at school.
Mhm.
Like my younger son, he draws. I mean, I can't draw. I can draw stick figures, but he'll come home, and then fortunately, because my wife does art and she can draw, like he has his whole like art set, and he's painting these awesome things. And I know they don't do that at school.
Yeah.
And he has a nice school. So that's really sad. I think it's unfortunately on us as parents to kind of like foster that when they're not in school, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, I didn't grow up with my kids have anything they want, I make sure they have it, but, I never had that, like, they don't even in high school, they don't have all these art things, you have to, like, kinda do that almost like club sports for kids, like baseball, football, you have to do that in the arts as well, which is kind of a bummer because you think they would devote 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour at school at least once a week.
I think it's stimulating to your brain in all kinds of ways, right? I think it's sort of a tragedy that it's not more of an expression, requirement, really, right? And I think it probably helps with all kinds of other things. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but there were plenty of times where I was not a good student academically,
Hmm,
but I played sports and that gave me a lot of confidence. And,
hell yeah,
you
that's
know,
awesome.
if they canceled sports, I probably would have felt like, oh, I got nothing, you know? So I think the
Mm,
more of those extracurricular things you build into a kid's life, the more things they have to be interested in. And then hopefully they find something that they're really passionate about and it takes off for them, right? And it's hard work. And it's not like this all, you were just born with this. You played regularly, you had great teachers, and then you were able to sort of take the risk. I mean, I think I read in my prep notes that like you were, up at 5 in the morning and you'd work until midnight trying to sell CDs. Like I think there's also this misnomer of like you're an over, there are 12 million downloads like this that you just
mm,
need to get like one hit where you've been working really hard on this for a long time and deserve credit for
yep,
that, you know?
I appreciate that. Yeah, sustaining is, I think, the challenge. Like you can have many successes, as I'm sure you know, but like in between these big things, like you just gotta stay consistent and every day. Like I think people only see like the glamorous few moments. They don't realize like the day to day like work you do. Like I love recording, but unfortunately, if I'm making a business out of this, and I'm independent, half my day is like on the phone or emailing and trying to wrap up contracts and doing all this stuff. But one thing I've done since day one, even as a street performer, is like I'm doing this. This is my job. So if I'm not doing this as a job, like how am I going to make money? And
Mhm.
then now things are changing with technology. You just got to pivot and kind of like go with it. But I think the product is always the same. It just is pivoting, and you kind of have to stay with it.
And so is that pivoting to a new audience or new technology or all of it?
All of the above. That's funny you said that. And I love hip hop and violin, but I listen to and play all genres, and it's interesting if you read like where labels in the last year have been putting their money. It's actually going away from hip hop, and I think I read like a note saying, "Hey, we're not investing any more money into this. It's not making money. The lyrics are negative, and the kids aren't really into that." And they're like, "Hey, we're going to put all our investments into Latin music and Afrobeats." And then now you're seeing this giant shift, even with like Beyonce doing a country album.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, and I know a lot of people in rap, and I'm starting to work with them that are shifting from R&B or hip hop, and they're like putting out country music. So like I think everybody just wants to earn a living, and if you're smart, you just got to like kind of go with the flow. And the cool thing is with what they're doing, even though it might have some twang, it might still have that underlying bed of like a trap beat or something like that.
Mhm.
But like they're blending genres, and I'm all for it. I know a lot of traditional country artists hate it, but it seems like the future is kind of genre blending, and it has been doing that for a while. So I think you just got to be open to whether it's a Latin track or a country track or EDM or pop or hip hop. And you can combine things if you're open to doing that. I think you'll have more of a chance of success.
So do you take those kinds of, I don't know what you'd call them, like marketplace reports, right? Or like sort of movement trends, and then think, okay, I'm going to have to pivot into more country music? Or is it you're going to do what appeals to you based on what inspires you?
Both,
Okay.
both. So like I gotta be smart. Like my base is hip hop. If you Google hip hop violin, or violinist, I'm probably the top or the top 3 or one of the top 5 at least. It's changing. So I don't wanna lose that and have that foundation, but I think I gotta sprinkle in things here and there and test the waters, if you will,
Mhm.
because it's like where everything is moving. So
Mhm.
you don't wanna, like, not be with it, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you have experience in lots of these genres, so it's not like you're
Mm.
going in there for the first time. Like you could kind of go and, own those other spaces too, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And so it used to be kind of a challenge, but now it's a positive thing is that being that I am an instrumentalist, like 15 years ago, I was working with very, very big producers, like almost from the start, they'd be hiring me. I talked to hey, their manager, I need a manager. What do you think? He's like, oh, you're real talented and you're gonna make a name for yourself, but you don't sing, so I can't represent you. Like I've heard that so many times. Oh, you're not a vocalist. Okay,
Interesting.
but that has a very for the most part, not everybody, that in my observation, has a very short shelf life. Whereas if you're an instrumentalist, uh, I can kind of pivot. So I'm playing at jazz festivals. I have country artists reaching out to me. I'm working with rappers. I'm working with R&B singers. So it's like I can kind of go in between those, which is pretty fun. And as long as you're staying true to that genre while you're playing at that show, you can kind of get away with it.
Mhm.
And it's fun at a jazz festival. Like I might throw in, "Hey, who wants to hear a country song?" Like I'll just joke with them, and if they're like booing, like no, and I'm like, "All right, I won't do that." If they're like, "Yeah," like some of the promoters will be like, "No," and I'll do it anyway, and like they'll just go crazy. Or I'll throw in like a 50 Cent song just because I can, and
Yep.
they're used to like Kenny G or whatever they're listening to. People want engagement and fun music, so if you can do that and you're real, I think that's the formula.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. So tell me, what was it like to work with 50 Cent?
Awesome. First of all, I'm a huge fan. There's a few people I'm diehard fans of in music. So in rap, it would be like Snoop Dogg and 50 Cent. Um,
And you've worked with both of them.
I've met Snoop twice. I've opened the first time I got to open with him. I performed with Trey the Truth in Houston, and he's a legend. And he discovered me on Instagram, which is pretty cool. And then he's like, "Hey, you got a show?" And I was like, "Sweet, I'll be there." And then he introduced me. So that was the first time. And then through a friend. He hired me at his event. Actually, ended up opening him. I got to see him again, and it's pretty cool. So I've got to see like my favorite rappers for free on stage, which is pretty dope. And then with 50 Cent, I was playing. I didn't open for him. I performed with him. So the challenge was to like not like be singing the lyrics while I'm playing. Like forget that I'm a fan. Wait, I gotta actually I'm playing an instrument here. Um, so that was pretty cool, and then just seeing all the people I've mentioned are probably the hardest working people I've seen. So that shows, like, it doesn't matter what you do. Like,
Mhm.
for example, I saw 50 on tour, like, works so hard. He would just go to city, city, city. Guy doesn't party, to my knowledge, isn't drinking, and he would do that. He'd do a sold out show, crush it. Generally, and I didn't go to the second part, go to a club, do an appearance, probably pick up a check, go to sleep, and go to the next one. I was like, wow,
Yep.
this guy works hard, like really hard. And I think there's no bypassing that. Like you have to have the work ethic on top of the talent. And so those are probably two of the coolest concerts I've ever seen, and that was fun. Other than that, I didn't perform with him. My third favorite concert was seeing Garth Brooks. I've seen him several times, and completely different genre. Guy's so charming. The first time I saw him was like in the cheap seats, like, and it was amazing. And then I spent a little more money, and I got like these VIP seats. I enjoyed both the shows equally. Like
Hmm.
one wasn't better than the other, and so that guy is a performer. I don't know him, but just seeing that, those are pretty cool, and those are 2 different genres. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm all over the place with music.
So how do you pick a song?
If it's releasing it for content, I do have a formula, what works for me, and it's usually like a gritty hip hop beat with classical melodies. But then when I'm collaborating with other artists, I try to like stay to what they're doing and then also stay on brand if I can, if that makes sense.
So did you do like some 50 Cent song and then he heard it, or how did that collaboration work?
Yes and no, and then yes. And
Okay.
so, like, I covered, his song "Into Club." That song went viral, and then one of his business associates who was putting on a celebrity basketball game, saw that, and this is the funniest story. It's a true story. Um, Apparently, he pitched me because he wanted somebody to play a celebrity basketball game. He's like, "Hey, I got a violinist. He's gonna play at the game," and I think he told it to his lawyer or somebody like that, and they're like, "No, we can't have a violinist play." Like I was like, "Just tell him." He's like, "No, he's got a viral song. It's everybody's watching it." And they're like, "Dude, I'm not telling him that." And then so nobody would tell him that there's a violinist, and so he's like, "All right, I'll just do it anyway." So the guy was taking a gamble on me. So I
Wow.
played at his halftime show, and then I think he liked it because then I got called to perform with him. But like he had no idea who I was until I played at that game. The only reason I got the opportunity was because I covered the song several years ago and then had some virality. And then the right person who was throwing an event for him saw that and kind of like
So that
connected
wasn't,
the.
I kind of wondered whether that was commissioned or whether that was you came up with it and it, went out and became viral on its own.
Oh no, that was all organic.
Wow. That's,
There was some serious work. If I'll give you a backstory on the game. So I know he's a rapper, and I know stadiums. It was at I think it was where Houston, the university, they have the basketball, and is they have the big speakers on top, but like the house sound is never good. And I was like, this has got to be good. So I got a budget, and I had subs, big subwoofers, put all around the whole stadium. I made sure of that. I made sure we got a, and I was like, hey, where's 50 going to be sitting? Right there. I want one right behind him. I want him to feel this. And I was like, hire this company. I need a good wireless because I played at a stadium before with a bad wireless and it went out and I was just like, nobody could hear what I was doing. It was really embarrassing. So fortunately, I was like, hey, we're gonna hire this company, make sure all these speakers are here, and then we just, uh, I think I did a good job, and it was definitely bumping, if you will, and that kind of like led to me performing with him live.
oh, that's cool. That's great. So, I mean, I feel like now that more people are entering this space, do you have a following of like other violinists who,
Yes, and that's wonderful, and also slightly annoying.
yeah.
So like this is a good thing. I've been doing it almost 20 years, so I've inspired a lot of people to do it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I was a kid when you were a street performer. I used to watch you, and now I'm doing the same thing." And I'm like, "Oh, great! Now I have more competition."
Yeah.
So like, it's wonderful. I think for the whole music community because they get more variety to listen to, and it makes it harder for me because now there's more people doing it. Just to be honest, but I think it's a positive thing. Like it keeps me on my toes too. I'm like, "Oh, wow, this person's doing this. I guess I can't slouch in the studio today. I need to give 100 to this," if that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
So
it
that
drives you.
having a little, competition, I think ultimately makes the product better, but when I first started, there was a handful of people doing it. Now there's a lot.
I mean, I can see that because I think if you were a young person playing violin, this music might speak to you more, right? And
Yep.
so you kind of think in some ways it's like part of the reason that you're as successful as you are, as good at this as you are, is because of the classical training that you were sort of forced to have because there weren't a lot of alternatives. And so I would imagine from a technical standpoint, you have this range. Whereas if you had only learned to play violin for hip hop, it might not have
Mm,
worked out this way, right?
that's true.
I mean, I think that kind of goes back to the sort of like you have to learn the basics and you have to learn them really, really well and keep practicing them in order to then go on and do the more sort of exciting or elaborate or different kinds of things.
I've noticed that in a lot of areas. For even in jazz music, like the whole concept is you need to learn all the rules. Like most of these jazz players go to Berklee College of Music and they're amazing. They're, okay, you learned all the rules, now break them. But you can't just break them until you know them. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to sound horrible. But if you do know what you're doing, then you can kind of expand. And I think that goes for anything. And I can't dance to save my life. Like fortunately, I can play music, but I see a lot of dancers and like even like the best hip hop or street dancers, and then you find out they have some formal training in ballet, maybe. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's they have their foundation. And they're like, and then they were able to go off and do something else at a more elite level. So I think that's kind of in every discipline.
I completely agree. It's sort of like you have to learn to walk before you can run, right? Like
Yes.
these are the skills you need. Well, I mean, I think it's part of why I was excited to talk to you is because I think this idea of like transforming a space can
Mm,
sometimes start as an experiment, but the people that I'm talking to, usually it was a risk. And it was a
mm,
risk that the outside world might have said, like, you have a choice. but you didn't feel like you did. Does that feel like something that fit for you? Or was this something
Yeah.
that was just sort of like you got to play in the space and then it took off and you realized,
Both,
you know
both,
what, this is
both,
where I
both,
want to
both.
be?
I knew what I wanted and didn't want. So when I was doing like a regular job, if you will, I was like, I know I didn't want that. And then I found out, oh, I can make money doing this, and it is a risk. Like I think some people that I went to high school with saw me street performing and were just laughing, like, oh, look at this loser. Nobody would say that now, but like you just got to know what you want. And for me, I was like, oh, this is cool. I never thought, oh, I'm a street performer. I was like, I own my own business. So I would, at the time, I had actual physical CDs, and I would go to the warehouse. But all right, give me 1,000 at a time. I would make them open every box, make sure they were good, and like I was just making it progressively better quality. And sometimes they have other artist CDs in my box. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And so like it was like a full time job, and I had set sales goals, and so for me, I like the autonomy. And with a regular job, you kind of have, unless it's commission based, a ceiling. So it's on me. Hey, how much money do I want to make?
Hmm.
If I'm working really hard, I want to get a lot out of it. If I'm lazy, well, that's on me. Like,
Hmm.
so that's kind of how I operate.
And I mean, again, like I sort of feel like, part of being an artist, right, is taking risks and expressing yourself in a new or different kind of fashion. And
Yep.
obviously, taking on something like violin hip hop is not something that was, welcomed before you did it in a way, but you kind of played around with it and figured out that there was something really fun about it, I would imagine, right? And at what point did you sort of recognize it, like this is what you'll be known for?
Well, I was making money, so like I was like, oh, this is fun, and then it's getting hired for events. I'm like, oh, this is fun. And so when I first started recognizing that, I was probably 4 years into it. Um, and I don't know how many people saw this, but I played basically myself. I was a street performer in the NBA basketball All Star game. So in 2010, I played a street performer playing classical music, and they interweaved that with sports. And then so uh, around then is a lot of events that started hiring me, or I started writing music for, were sports related. So I've written a lot of music for ESPN, for NFL, like HBO Hard Knocks. I've scored a bunch of music covers and originals, because like what I do is like really hype. So like, oh, we can use this for like our teaser, or like a lead in for something. Um,
You should
and
do a
then
teaser for me. We should have you do a teaser for the show.
I got you. Um,
Amazing.
so that's when I was like, oh wait, I'm becoming more successful. Like I'm not just selling a CD. I'm like, oh, this is bigger. And then 2011 is when I went from street performer to professional, and it was 100% because of media. I went on the Ellen show, and then literally the next day, like Aria Las Vegas, hey, we got this gig. It's a big check. Blah blah blah. Then I played for them again. It was for Michael Jordan. I'm like, okay. And then literally it was like overnight went from street performer to like touring, and agents were calling and all that fun stuff.
When you look back on that period, was there one performance that you feel like was your favorite?
No, and I don't ever think there's been just one thing. I think it's a lot of things compiled together. And even with these big things, like then I have to sustain it and I got to keep going. And then it might be a few years before something else really big happens. So like, what do you do between then? You just got to keep working and hustling and figuring out where you can fit. So things are always changing. At the time, even though I was doing these bigger gigs and festivals, I was like, oh, I can make a career. It's like almost blue collar as a musician playing at colleges. And so I might be playing at a cafeteria at lunch, and then a theater at night, like in the same day, and then like a football game the following night. And I would just go to these showcases and get booked all over the country, like in different territories.
That's cool. You're also building an audience, right? Because people hear that,
Yes.
and then
And I don't even know if that exists to the capacity that it did for me then. Like everything is changing. Like you couldn't replicate what I did in the exact way that I did it because CDs don't exist. When I was booking at colleges, uh, they would fill out actual physical paper forms and express intent. Hey, we want to book you. We're going to have a block booking. Hey, these 15 schools are going to come together and you're going to have a tour. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I think everything went paperless and digital, and then people would go back to their university, maybe forget about the performance. And
yeah,
so that kind of sucks for people trying to do that because I'm kind of out of that loop now.
yeah,
Uh, but even that changed. But things are always popping up, like, and you just got to find whatever space works for you, and 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 then realize there is a shelf life, and kind of like try to pivot when things change.
When you were like, say, 12 or 13, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I wanted to play basketball.
Well, so there you go. You like, you're performing in basketball that like now you're the star.
Yeah, yeah, no, and then I realized I was short. And but yeah, I didn't really it didn't really click to me until like out of school when I realized I could mix these worlds that were fun and then people would actually pay money. So I was kind of a late bloomer, if you will. But fortunately, I had the foundation to kind of attack it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really have this thing that whenever somebody says like, "Oh, you're an overnight sensation," you dig a little deeper and you find out the person has been working really hard on this and building these skills for a long time, right? Like there's nothing that happened overnight. And I think late bloomer, like look at all the experiences you had that probably inform how you're managing your business, right? How you're picking songs, how you're thinking about where you want to go, how to pivot, right? That's all learned experience.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, this is really fun. I'm definitely like a big fan. And I just think it's really cool what you're doing. I mean, as somebody who likes both hip hop and classical music a lot, I feel like it's really exciting.
Thank you. And what you're doing is exciting. I was watching your videos and I was like, wow, these people are too smart for me.
No,
But no, I think what you're doing is awesome as well. And if you want some hype music or theme songs, I got you.
I would love that. I feel like the Cypress Hill bit would just make sense, right? To show people that like that's what got me
Sure.
excited.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool if you want to show them like the actual Instagram video.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have any rights for that. I was doing that as a promo piece for their concert coming up on May 4th.
And so how does that work? Do you usually have to ask permission before you do it or
If I'm covering a song and I'm not selling that song and it's on Instagram, no. And actually, it's promotion for whoever. If you do a good job, it's one showing some respect. Like I took some time to learn that, and then you're also promoting something. So I'm a huge Cypress Hill fan, and it was through their booking agency that met me at a concert with Baby Bash, the artist. I met a really nice lady named Blanca. She works with Bobby D Presents. Hopefully, I'm saying all this right. And they promote concerts. So they're promoting like Ice Cube. They're promoting Lil Wayne's tour. And then they're promoting Cypress Hill, and they're, hey, this is all booked up, but hey, maybe I'm not even sure if I'll be playing at that, but hey, make some covers. And so I was like, sure, I'm a big fan.
yeah,
And so I'm kind of helping them, and then they're helping me, and they're reposting it, so I'm getting like
that's awesome.
visibility.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody's winning on
That's
the
very
promotion.
cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. I feel like I grew up with them. And I
Mm.
think like when I was in high school, so this is like a really long time ago, I thought Cypress Hill was a place in Boston. Like I was sure that they were like around the corner. You know what I mean? Like and so it's the music like really brings you back. I think like that's one of the things that's really magical about music,
Mm.
right? I think music and smell does that where it really
The
transcends.
nostalgia, it brings you back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you look at who's doing well right now, it's a lot of these groups from the 90s and 2000s because for the most part, a lot of these new rappers they come and they go and they're not memorable. The lyrics aren't great. The subject matter is not great. It's not fun. At least in the 90s, if they were talking about something maybe not a great concept, it would be fun. You could dance to it. Like now, it's
Right, or
like
like
this.
Dre's album drops and like you get it and you listen to it from start to finish.
Yes,
It's like it's not just one.
they're all doing well. If you look at a lot of these, they have sold out nostalgia tours. But if you look at the people who are selling them out within the genre of hip hop, R&B, like they have hits from 20, 30 years ago that are still hits now. Like so, they're timeless.
Yeah, I mean,
I follow.
actually in our household we're kind of crazy. We bought Chronic as a record when Dre
Okay,
took it back, right? And he was turning it into a what do you call it? The like digital currency thing.
okay.
So you
I
can't
don't remember the digital thing,
you
but
can't stream it anymore. Most people don't,
okay,
but if you try to stream that album, it won't come up. And so what is it called? NFTs, right?
okay.
And so he was going to move towards that. And so my husband and I were like, we need to buy it as a record so that we have a physical copy because we don't have our CDs anymore.
That's true. If you notice a lot of artists and producers like him, they'll take their material off of a streaming platform, and if you don't already have it, then you can't listen to it.
That's right.
Because they don't have to. They have their own following, so they can kind of do whatever they want. Like I think even Garth Brooks has his own streaming platform.
Oh,
Like if you
wow.
try to listen to him on Spotify, like pull up a song, it'll be another artist that sounds similar to him, but that's not him.
Uh huh.
because he controls his own platform, and I think he wants a better deal. He's like, why should I give them my business and followers if I don't have to?
Yeah, well, we see this, like, Taylor Swift's whole thing of, like, re-recording all her music.
I think she had a producer, rip her off, and contractually, there was nothing she could do about it, if I understand this correctly. I've actually had a similar situation, where I didn't get paid on it. I'm still not getting paid on a certain album, and it does well. So I've recreated most of the songs because they stopped paying me.
Mhm. And then you just push out that newer version of it.
Yes. So there's so many shady people in music,
Yeah.
but definitely being independent and kind of doing it yourself, I think, is the way to go. Because then you control how well something is gonna do or not do.
Once you have the attention of, like, a viral video, right, or you start building your following, you're not reliant on somebody else to get you out in front of the audience, so you should be able to dictate your terms more. I mean, that's sort of a supply and demand kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and if I could give any advice to younger artists, it would be to stay independent. And actually, I think most people are going to be going that way anyway, because in my opinion, record labels are dead. Radio is dead. I was never a part of that, which for like several years, I'm like, oh, I'm not in this thing. Turns out, if I was in that thing, they would own everything, rip you off, not pay you what you're worth, and then later, like when things go bad, you don't own your catalog or your streaming, and that can literally pay your bills.
Yeah.
So if you can be independent, it's much harder at first, but once you have some success, you'll see a much greater reward, if that makes sense.
That's a great advice. I mean, I've seen that in the book publishing world where it used to be that like you'd get a big signing bonus and they'd put you on tour, right? Now they won't do any of that. And I think most people who get book deals are people who already have huge followings because the publisher assumes they'll be able to sell. So they're not taking risks on, young authors or novelists or people who don't have a following, but that are really great writers. And then they own most of the book. And so it is, and you can self-publish pretty easily on Amazon or wherever.
Do you self-publish on Amazon?
I don't, but I definitely thought about it, and I think for it, the next book I write, I would seriously consider it. I mean, I think there's a stigma, right? So like my
Mm,
old school self is like, you got to go through one of the big publishers if you're established. But financially, it is far better for you to go by yourself. And I think at this stage of the game, like I don't really care. But when I was younger, it was definitely like people would be like, "Oh, she's self-published." Like it's like you're kind of like no one wanted you. And
mm.
that's wrong because I think from the financial standpoint, you make a lot more money and you control it. Right.
Yep,
So you
yep.
can
If you
promote it how you want. They're going to expect you to promote. Like, so now all those benefits are gone anyway. Like the reasons to go with a big publishing house don't exist. So there's really no incentive to do it, other than your ego, I guess, on some level.
Yep, there's a few independent rappers who I follow, and they may not have as many sales or streams as some of these big major acts on big labels, and they actually make way more money because essentially 100% of those sales are going directly to them
Yeah.
and not to a label who is first going to recoup and then write a million different reasons why they're not going to pay you.
Mhm.
And then if it's a big success, they'll either hide it and then you have to like sue them to get it, and even if you do that, maybe you won't get anything. Like that's a headache. So I think you should just avoid that altogether.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also the kind of thing where, like, you don't have any control over their expenses. So, like, they
Yep.
decide that 5 executives need to come to your show and they all fly in a private jet or whatever, like, that's coming out of your money. Whereas if it was
Yeah.
just you,
I
you would
get
never approve that, right? Like,
it.
so anyway, thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun. And I'm gonna obviously keep following you and all of that. Maybe we'll do some collab posting or something great.
Okay.
Keep me posted on what you're up to because I feel like it would be fun to come to one of your shows if you're ever in the New England area.
Okay.
And anything I can do to sort of help get the word out when you have new stuff, I'm happy to help promote.
And vice versa. Like it's pretty cool with the whole collab. What do you call that? Where you can make a bunch of people collaborators on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
So if you have anything you want to get out that's relevant to people that might follow me, I would love to share that.
Okay. Well, when this episode is out for sure, I think that would make sense.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. It was really fun.